What I've wasted my time on, number 2. As promised, I am back with the weekly drops. And since I don't have a full write-up this week, I'll share a list of things that I've been enjoying. So if you see the What I've Wasted My Time on the title, you know what's going on. Let's go. And then there's a little animated GIF here with Scarface. I work hard for these. What I'm watching, Financial Audit by Caleb Hammer. This is a YouTube show where Caleb audits people's finances to help them get out of debt. Think of Dave Ramsey, but for a younger generation. The crazy part is that people come up to the show willingly, and they argue, no matter where they stand financially. It's like watching a train wreck. Watching this show does wonders in making me feel better about my finances. If you watch this episode, you'll see what I mean. And there's a link down here, a YouTube video. 41-year-old refuses to get a job and grow up. A financial audit. What I'm playing, Helldivers 2. I'll just let this clip speak for itself. Looks like this is a video game. The graphics look pretty cool. Nice little checkout session after the workday. What I'm reading, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. I'm about 70% done with the book, and I have to say it's great. If you are someone who is holding back on starting something, anything, this book is worth a read. I think I'll speak on it more when I finish it. My current take is that it's a book made to help you fight that resistance that keeps you from starting those projects. Gives you a few ways to help you fight the fear of starting while also providing some mindset shifts to keep you going. I'll wrap it up here. I hope you enjoyed at least one of these recommendations, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for reading, OG. And that is an excerpt from the Repair Log, the newsletter for Mr. OG, Air Force veteran, flight mechanic, and writer. Welcome to the 3 Deeper Cuts podcast. Good to be back with you. 3 Deeper Cuts is the lifestyle magazine for the working physician, for the surgical pathologist deep in the foggy trenches of community practice. I'm your host, Chuck G. Every few weeks, we bring you something to think about, something to read, or something to listen to. 3 Deeper Cuts, as usual, is brought to you by Formalin Fix Paraffin-Embedded Tissue. Emphasis on the formalin. We're all sniffing formalin down here, aren't we? You have to, just to process what's going on in this great nation. 3 Deeper Cuts also aims to be a platform for recently separated veterans. Give people a chance to tell their story, talk about what they're working on, what they learned in and out of service. My friend and colleague OG, who I met through just writing on the internet, is a prior Air Force. He's got an interesting story. I think his background is from Puerto Rico. And he's out here just sharing his journey on his newsletter. You can check out brianortizgonzalez.ghost.io. And I'll paste that into the description text below. And this is just a fun conversation. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Here we go. Welcome, Mr. OG. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Chuck. How about yourself?
Doing great. Nice warm day here in Dallas. You and I just connected on the internet. Seems like we were writing about similar topics or kind of had a similar line of thinking on some topics regarding analog lifestyle, but also enjoying what we can learn on the internet. And I know you're also in the military. So what led you to join the military? Like, where were you at in life? And what was your goal?
I was fresh out of high school when I joined. I just knew that, one, I didn't want my parents paying for any type of college loans. And then I also had the influence of my uncles. So my uncles were in the Army. So he was like my biggest recruiter in terms of not joining the Army. He's like, go to the Air Force or the Navy, but do not join the Army. And bottom line, my mom would tell me, all right, like, when you graduate, you can go to college or you can go to the military, but you're not staying here. So that was one of the biggest things. She's like, all right, if you're not going to college, go enlist. And I'm like, okay, I'll go enlist then.
Nice. Tell me more about your uncle. What was his role and what were some conversations you had with him?
My uncle, he's on my mom's side. He was infantry in the Army. And he was just there as a guide. So he would, once I mentioned interest in the military, he would just sit me down. And he's pretty direct. So I was like, look, you're not going into the Army. That's bottom line. If you have anything else, you're going to try to look into the Air Force or see in the Navy. But I think you'd probably be better off in the Air Force. And he gave me some resources, and then eventually I ended up finding a friend he was a recruiter. I don't know what, I can't really remember. I just knew he gave me the rundown as to when you enlist, this is how it goes. I didn't actually end up enlisting with him as a recruiter. I had to find another one in town. But he sat us down, me and my family, in a Wendy's for whatever reason. We were there for about 2 hours, like running down, all right, when you enlist, this is what you do. When you're setting up your sheet, your dream sheet, if you know what that is.
Yeah.
For your dream sheet. And so I don't know what topic or what terms are the same between the branches. So if I ask you something and it seems redundant, let me know, please. But yeah, so he gave me that rundown as to if you want to go overseas, this is what you should type in, etc. And but yeah, that's where my uncle was. He was just making sure, hey man, just don't join the Army. And then whenever I finished my active duty contract, he was the one who told me, do not separate completely, go to the reserves. And he's the reason why I'm still in. And I'm glad I listened to him, man, because it was definitely extremely helpful.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because that was something that I encountered. I got out in 2016, and I just made a clean break. So tell me a little bit about what are the pros and cons of staying on as a reservist.
The best way I can explain it is I always tell people, imagine active duty as like a roller coaster, but you're not getting off until they tell you you're getting off. With the reserves, once you hit that loop, you can tell them, you know what, I'm off here. So all right, man, we'll stop the roller coaster, get off, and it'll keep on going. The reserves gives you a bunch of flexibility when it comes to pursuing a career on the outside, or if you just want to continue your career in the military. And it also opens doors. So for example, in my field with cyber, we'll have the personnel will come in, they'll go do their training, and they might hop on a set of orders for about 6 months working with the unit. And if they like it, and if they do good work, sometimes they'll find a contracting position with that same unit, getting paid a lot more money, and then once their orders are finished, they'll get employed by a company, and they'll just remain as a weekend warrior on the reserves.
Okay.
So they'll enjoy their benefits, and then they'll do a pretty easy transition to a little bit better paying job on the outside.
Okay. So when you were filling out your dream sheet, so I'm guessing this is after you took the ASVAB and got in. So this would have been before boot camp or like during boot camp?
For the reserves? What do you mean?
Or when you started out?
Oh, when I started out? I was working in aircraft maintenance.
Okay. So when you later became a reservist, like so you're just in the private sector and you just have some overlapping job skills, or what benefit is it to the Air Force that you stay on?
What's the benefit of the Air Force if you stay on?
Yeah, so are you working in a similar role, or like what exactly do you do?
Oh, okay. Right now in the reserves, because we have units that are just obviously full of reservists, and they'll come in. So we still have a mission on the reserve side. Sometimes what you'll do is in your reserve unit, you'll augment an active duty unit. So whatever the active duty unit can do at certain times, the reserve will fit in.
Okay. Yeah, I want to back up a little bit more because that's interesting. I've met a couple people that have worked in aviation previously, like Marine Corps aviation, but I haven't talked to a lot of Air Force people. What was that like when you started out? Was that your first choice, getting out of boot camp, or did you have to finagle something? Because I know some people struggle getting the job that they actually want to do.
The way it works with the Air Force when you enlist, you don't come in with a guaranteed job. When you go to the recruiter's office, you'll make a list, and if I remember correctly, my top choice was actually cybersecurity.
Nice.
And then there was a few more intelligence-based jobs, and then a mixture of some other mechanical jobs. And what ended up happening was I was waiting for a position to open for about 6 months.
Okay.
Because the spots were all taken. And then I get a call from the recruiter, at that 6-month mark, hey man, we just got a guy get arrested, and his spot filled out or is empty now, but he's open mechanical, and you have mechanical jobs on your list. So with open mechanical, you can go in and you can pick your job when you hit basic. Not true. And but yeah, I can get you out of here next week. And I was like, oh, absolutely, sign me up. Not knowing that I was never going to pick the job. And about probably 5th or 4th week of basic, hey, you're an F-15 crew chief. So, okay, cool. And that was that. That's how I got into maintenance.
Nice. So can you break that down a little bit? Because this is something that's like new and refreshing for my audience, which is mostly medical type people. So what's it like to maintain a jet? What was your day-to-day like the nuts and bolts of it?
So with maintenance, it's always going to be 3 shift ops. So you'll have your day shift, your afternoon shift, which we call swings, and then your night shift, which we call mids. On the day shift, your job is basically to work with what we call the flyers. So you show up to roll call, they assign you an aircraft. Normally once you get to a certain point, you'll have your assigned aircraft, and you go get your toolbox, you check it out, make sure everything's good, and then you roll out your box to your spot. At that point, you would do a quick checkup on your aircraft, make sure the documents are good to go, make sure there's no servicing that needs to get done, and then you basically get the jet ready for the pilot. After that, you'll walk the flight line and the line, basically making sure there's all the personnel will line up at the flight line at one end, and then you basically just walk. And you're basically looking at the floor, making sure there's no nuts and bolts and stuff on the floor that can get sucked up into the intakes, which we call FOD walk.
Okay.
So after FOD walk, you go back to your spot, and then basically you wait for the pilot. Pilot shows up, salute, give him the forms, talk to him for a little bit, and then they'll get on the aircraft, they'll crank it, and you go through the checkup process, make sure everything's good upon startup, and basically you send the pilot off. He'll take your aircraft. Depending on the mission, they might come back pretty quick. They might take a few hours. It all depends on the training or wherever you're at.
Okay.
Jet comes back. You recover the aircraft, do a quick inspection again if it's going to fly. If it's going to fly again, you do what we call a through flight. So you do a through flight inspection. It's a little bit shorter, and it just makes sure all the basics are good. Nothing crazy is going on with the aircraft. And you prep it again for the next pilot. Next pilot comes up, takes it, and by the time he's coming back down, as a day shifter, your day is almost over. At that point, you're turned over to swing shift. As a swing shifter, you'll come up, check what aircraft you're taking over. You'll probably catch that jet from its second flight, so when it comes back down, you would have already turned over the day shift personnel.
Okay.
Receive the aircraft and do what we call the post-flight inspection, or BPO. I think it's a basic post-flight inspection.
Okay.
It's been a minute. And that one's a much more in-depth inspection. So you go in, you'll do the inspection, knock out any maintenance that's on the aircraft that may have, or any damage that might have occurred during flight, whether it's some components that might have failed and we got to replace them. You'll knock out all that maintenance, knock out the post-flight, and probably by the time you're done, it'll be time for mid-shift. So mid-shift will get turned over any type of maintenance that didn't get done during swing shift, and a few basic preparations for the flyers for the next day.
Interesting. Okay, so when I post this, I'll paste in a photo of an F-16. Could you just explain just to somebody who knows nothing about airplanes, what's the basic anatomy of an F-16, and what are the basics that you learned your checklist? What were the key items you had to watch out for? You mentioned debris on the runway potentially getting up in the intake, but yeah, so could you just summarize?
Yeah, for the record, F-15.
F-15, okay.
Yeah, it's depending on which model. You might work on the C model, which is your basic air-to-air, and then you have your E model, which is a Strike Eagle, which is more for air to ground. Then the E model comes in a 2-seater variant. It has 2 engines, and your main landing gear, your nose landing gear. When you're checking for the aircraft, the basic stuff you're looking for is any loose hardware. So you'll start seeing certain panels that will have loose coming off, or screws on certain panels from flight. You check for servicing, hydraulic, oil. Make sure the main landing gear is usually one of the main areas you look at when upon landing. Make sure there's the height of the struts is correct. That way the aircraft isn't bottoming out when it lands.
Okay.
You're checking the brakes. Obviously, there's no brakes on the leaks on the brakes. And I'm going over like quick through flight.
Yeah.
And then and sometimes even like missing panels, because sometimes it can happen where a panel would just literally, or when I say panel, something kind of small, could come off during flight due to like maybe some adhesive wasn't there properly or something wasn't settled correctly.
Okay.
But yeah.
You spent 4 years active duty and then went to reserves?
Six active.
6 years,
And then currently, now it's like my fourth year going to reserves.
Okay, so you mentioned that being active duty is like being on a roller coaster. I would agree with you. And could you just describe to me like some of the ups or downs or the noteworthy ones?
Man, I know for our unit specifically, because we were in Okinawa, our ops tempo was pretty high. So it wasn't rare to have 10 to 12-hour days. So you spend a lot of time out there. Sometimes you'd come in on the weekend as well. You'd be going 12 days in a row.
Wow.
And then, but you have your highs, right? Your highs are when you get to go on your TDYs. So sometimes you get to go to Guam, or you get to go to Korea, or you get to deploy and you get to go actually participate in the mission. And it was, as hard as it was, pretty satisfying and rewarding that you're putting this crazy piece of metal up in the air to go do some crazy stuff and get your pilots to do their thing, come back safely, and to execute the mission. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a unique, you just get to see some really unique stuff that as a civilian you just never see.
Yes.
And just access to cutting edge hardware, technology, and just most people had never been to Okinawa. I wanted to go. I didn't get orders, but yeah. You're in this kind of high-tech field. You're a mechanic. Compared to the average, 21-year-old, you're essentially globetrotting. You've gone far away from home. Where in that process did you like have the interest to eventually pivot into working as a cyber analyst instead of as a mechanic?
That one's also funny too, because basically I've always liked computers. I've always liked tech, so that's always been there.
Okay.
Now, whenever I was separating, part of our processing is going through the recruiter, like the National Guard or the reserve recruiter. I went into that office with the intention to just separate clean cut. But then I remember my uncle had told me, and when I'm talking to the reserve recruiter, she had told me, hey, why don't you just stay in working on aircraft? What's one weekend a month after you've been doing it for 6 years? And I told her, I'm not touching an aircraft unless I'm riding in it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, you can change your job if you go to the reserves. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You can change your jobs. Oh, okay. So just pick a base and I'll show you what's available. So, okay. So I asked her for 3 bases. And then I started choosing. I just went off of whichever ones, because I was a staff at the time. I'm like, whichever ones didn't demote me. And then I'm okay, there's a few staff spots open in this space. And I just narrowed down and I just saw, what was it? All source analyst I think is the actual nomenclature for the AirForce site.
Okay.
And I looked it up. I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty interesting. And that's how I made my decision. And I just coincidentally went to a cyber unit.
Interesting. So I know we can't get into specifics about the mission in cybersecurity, but could you just explain to a 5-year-old how networks work, what types of things that not just the military but anybody should be concerned about with regard to their computer network, and what you learned along the way?
I think the best analogy I've used or I've seen for what you meant works is basically just think of when you're on your computer and you're connecting with the internet, you're thinking about it like mail getting delivered back and forth. So essentially, you don't want anybody reading your mail, and that's
right.
what you can think about when you're opening up your websites or whatever it is on your computer. So you think about how can I secure my mail? So then just when you get into certain things like VPNs and just not clicking links that are sketchy. But to backtrack, essentially just mail. Just don't go into areas where you think there's a risk of your privacy or your safety being compromised. And then make sure you're keeping your computer protected.
You mentioned VPN. Can you break that down? Just what exactly is it? How does it work? And how does it protect you as a computer user?
VPN is basically just a virtual private network. What it'll do is it'll create I guess you can call it like a tunnel between a secure server and your computer. And then it'll route the traffic from your computer to that secure server and then to whatever it is you're communicating. So that website you're connecting to doesn't know it's you personally. It doesn't have your direct address.
Okay.
It just has that address where that server is hosted. So, for example, you can connect to a server. Maybe you live in Atlanta and you're connecting to a server in Dallas. And that server in Dallas' address is just 123, just for lack of a better term, 123. But your address is 456. When you connect to a website, it'll think that whoever's connecting to it is 123. It's not your 456 address.
Got you.
And it gives you a little bit of privacy in that regard, where people can't see what's happening between you and whatever website it is you're connecting to.
Okay, but the service that you're paying for the VPN service, they know all your information, right?
Correct. That's where it gets a little bit weird, because you have to try to. It's just you got to mitigate risk, right? Like this company has seen my traffic versus who I want to keep it from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is a little bit weird sometimes to think about how to 100% protect your data.
So what are some of the more reputable VPNs that, so this audience is working doctors and healthcare professionals, ex-military, just working people. So what are some reputable ones that they could potentially look into?
I personally use NordVPN. I know there's ExpressVPN, and there's one more, but I know the biggest ones I always hear of are Nord, which is the one I use, and Express.
Okay. What makes them better?
I wouldn't be able to tell you, to be honest. I just know I use Nord.
Okay. All right, so I don't know how to phrase this without asking too many specifics. Would you say that there are some living situations that could potentially put you at increased risk of a breach? Like, for example, if you're in a apartment complex or a big condominium building with a lot of Wi-Fi traffic, a lot of other networks that pop up on your Wi-Fi screen, is that a potential risk?
Oh, I would say so, because you have to, especially when you're connecting somewhere and you don't, okay, let's say your apartment complex's Wi-Fi name is apartment, right? Just apartment Wi-Fi.
Okay.
And somebody could come in and rename their own network apartment Wi-Fi. And if you're not clicking to the right one, you could possibly be surfing the web and signing in to services on a network that's not really private.
Got it.
So that's one of those things where you have to be aware of the Wi-Fi you're using. That's why sometimes people just say, hey, just use your own personal hotspot on your phone if you can help it.
Okay.
Don't connect to airport Wi-Fi's. Try not to connect to like your Starbucks or your normal coffee shops, because those are usually the targets for adversaries to come in, set up a fake little network. Or it's not fake, you can still connect to it. And then they'll sit there and harvesting, whether it's credentials while you're signing in. You think you're privately browsing, but you're not, right? They're seeing the traffic in and out with what you're typing in. So that's one of those situations where in a place where there's a bunch of Wi-Fi networks, to just be obviously know which one you're connecting to, and if you don't know, then just err on the side of caution and use your own personal hotspot.
Got you. All right. You hear that, audience? Use your personal hotspot on your cell phone. That's your best bet. So one thing that comes to mind is like having a spare battery pack or just like a plug-in charger while you're at a coffee house, because that's going to drain the battery. Would you agree?
100%.
Okay. It's interesting. More and more, at least, especially over the last, I'd say, 8 years or so, in the event that I do go to a coffee shop, I have a kid now, so a lot of the times it's just like a short period of time where I'm just taking a quick break. So I'm actually trying to deconnect. Like I don't even bring my laptop to the coffee house. I'll just go totally analog for an hour or so. But I remember back in my 20s, early 30s, I would often connect to these networks with a laptop or even with my phone. Nothing bad happens, but I think I just got lucky. I agree with you. I think it's too easy for people to have nefarious motives and ultimately steal your passwords, your credit card information. All that stuff it's in Safari, right? So can people see your Safari if you log on to the wrong Wi-Fi network?
Yes, so you'd be able to... Hold on, can you hear that?
Yeah, it sounds like a little lawnmower in the background, but it's no big deal. I can always edit that out.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so basically you could be exposing yourself to somebody seeing what you're typing in. So as you're typing in your password,
Okay.
people would be able to see what you're typing in. Sometimes you have most of the time you have those circles that kind of block out your characters. But sometimes, I don't know if you notice, like where it'll show you the last letter you typed, and it'll keep going. And sometimes you might forget, like, crap, did I type the right one? And you might hit the little eyeball real quick. And so that's one of those things where, okay, if somebody's checked looking at your stuff, that's a quick little screenshot, boom, okay, that's the password.
Got you.
Yeah, it's surprising the avenues there are for getting, what's the word? I guess I don't want to use breach, but we'll use it for now in terms of, because there's so many things that are connected. You have the Internet of Things where your fridge is connected to Wi-Fi, maybe your washing machine, and there's a bunch of avenues for, those are also avenues that adversaries can take to connect into your network, right? They can ping off of that.
I wondered about that, man. It's too much. It's too much connectedness. It's like, why do you need Wi-Fi on everything? Like all these new appliances and everything. I've been toying with fortunately I drive an old car, like a 2008 truck, and the Camry is pretty old, but I think it still has GPS. But yeah, everything is just so connected. It's because everything, like it's every even boring appliance company is now a data company. All right, so this is very interesting and useful for this podcast because in my industry, as in a lot of industries, there's been some pretty high-ticket cyber breaches of medical practices. And the way they have described it has been like personnel error, similar to the types of things that you mentioned, like somebody just getting lax and clicking on a link that opened up some bad actor into their network. Oh, so here's another question. Just like every coffee shop has its own business Wi-Fi, every hospital has its own guest Wi-Fi, and then physician Wi-Fi or healthcare worker Wi-Fi that is supposed to be secured. But my understanding is that, so if you log on to that, like everyone at that hospital IT department or whoever is like monitoring it, like they can see everything that you're typing and every website that you're scrolling or accessing. That's correct, right?
You can usually assume that if you're connecting to, well, any Wi-Fi, if your company has a Wi-Fi connection or just a network you're connecting to, they're being able to track and see what you're doing, right? Because then obviously they're going to want to know, okay, what type of websites are you logging into, the information that's going in and out of the network, so on and so forth. Are you downloading stuff? Are you uploading stuff? How much did you upload? What times are you logging into, right? Are these off hours? If Chuck's normally here from 0700 to 1400, why is there a huge spike of activity at like 2300? You know what I mean?
So things to be mindful of, both on work networks and at your home network. So use a VPN, and obviously you and I know this. Common sense would dictate that you don't access anything at your employer's website. your employer's Wi-Fi that you don't want them to see. But with people, working swing shifts, long hours, sometimes the mind can drift, and it's something to be aware of. So let's keep this going. I've been reading a little bit about cryptocurrency, and I think I saw somebody that is a mutual follow said people that work in cybersecurity understand that Bitcoin is basically a potential solution to financial fraud or keeping your transactions safe. I don't understand that because the way I understand Bitcoin is it's basically a shared public ledger, so everyone can see everyone else's transactions, right? Are you familiar with that? Can you explain that to me?
No, when it comes to crypto, that's one of those topics that I'm pretty ignorant in, to be honest.
Cool. All right. Let's keep this going. So we talked about cyber breaches at hospitals. So you still work for the military, but do you mostly work remote, or are you actually physically on base? And how is that possible if you're potentially having access to sensitive things?
I mostly work on base, and then if I ever do work remote, it's always just at that point, if I'm working remote, it's just going to be an admin day, right? Basic
Gotcha.
email stuff, troop paperwork, how all that goes.
Yeah.
It's never going to be any real work stuff, to be honest, because, when you're not doing outside the building.
Got it. Why are you on X, and what do you want to achieve in, say, 5 years?
So on X, it's funny because when I initially joined, it was just, obviously it was Twitter, and then it was just the funniest platform.
Yeah.
It was just the best way for me to just scroll and get some humor. But as time went on, and I want to say about a year ago, I decided I got introduced to this whole thing of writing online and just creating stuff online. And now it's almost like my little journal. I'm trying to basically give myself, or give those 20-year-olds the advice I wish I had.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to build, is like a library of resources that I wish I would have had when I was younger. And ideally, if I would want to end up building an income from helping out others, and whether it's through teaching or building educational resources or even just mentorship.
Okay.
But that's where the direction I want to take it in.
Cool. So do you have is it all on X, or is there some outside website that you're also building to complement that? Or it's got to be tough if you're still working on base.
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's weird. I'm trying to manage it, man. So right now I'm only focusing on X. I do have a website where I do my newsletter. It's at brianog.com.
Okay.
And then I'm trying to, since I've been doing video now on X, I do have a YouTube channel. It's not listed yet. There's no videos uploaded to it because I just wanted to upload them on X first and just get that habit out there. But it'll be basically my X channel, my website, and then my YouTube working in tandem.
Oh, sweet. Look at this. All right. I'm sorry I didn't ask you about this earlier. I would have done a deep dive into you got a whole library here. Brian Ortiz, OG.com. Check your stats. So are there any one of these posts in particular that's more meaningful to you that you want to share with us? What I wasted my time on this week. All right. Press start. This is awesome, man. You've been getting some work in.
I think the Press Start series was the one where I got out of my head, that whole 4-week one, because that's when I started posting videos.
Okay. I noticed that. Okay.
Yeah, man, because it took forever. I had that huge, that doubt in the back of your head. You want to make everything perfect, and you just don't get it done.
Well, that's all military right there.
Dude, it's terrible, man. So it's just like that nagging, it's not good. We got to get it ready because it's going to get destroyed in a few hours, right, on inspection or whatnot.
Yep.
So I was carrying that over to my work, and then I'm like, you know what? Let me do this thing where I just oust myself out in public, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I'll look dumb if I don't do it because I said I would. And then I started getting out of my own head, and I'm like, okay, let me just get a video out every week and then share my stats. So that's where the weeks come in.
Nice.
And then week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and I just shared the results, what goals I met, the ones I didn't, why I didn't, lessons learned, etc.
Sweet. So do you like this platform Ghost?
Yeah, so far it's the only one I've been using. I had that picture for a minute. It's pretty simple. However, I know there's another newsletter site called Beehive.
Right.
I'm not sure, because I know for Ghost, for example, if I wanted to do, unless I just don't know how to do it, but I know, so you know how some people have those email courses?
Right, yeah. Like
that's something I would like to set up.
Okay.
I don't think I could do it with Ghost, because Ghost, basically, I write my post out, and then it just goes out at whatever time I set it to.
Okay.
But I don't think I could say, hey, this specific set of emails or these specific set of posts, I want them to get triggered upon this action. See what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, I got you, man. That's one of the reasons I wanted to connect with you on the podcast, because I could tell that we're at similar phases, and I can totally relate to the military is somewhat isolating. It's very different than being on free to your own lifestyle. Like, you have to adhere to a certain set of standards. And because you're physically on base, like, it's challenging to do anything on the side. At least that's what I was, at a completely different world up until 2016. And even after that, like, I had the same doubts of kind of putting myself out there
For sure.
in public. So yeah, hats off to you. I'll paste your link in the show notes, because I think I've connected with a handful of like ex-military. You're not ex, but you're still a reservist, but I've connected with a handful of people in a kind of a similar background and various specialties of and branches of service. Oh, cool. Repair. I'm like going down this rabbit hole right now. Repair log. Stop. You can either wish you started sooner or just start now. I got tired of wishing I had started sooner. Let's talk about that more, like, because I think that there's people listening that are either ex-military or they're in a fairly rigid profession such as medicine or corporate America. So the number one resistance thing, at least that I experienced, I'm sure you can relate to this, is you don't want to look like a dumbass. In the same way that when you're a leader, like you were staff sergeant, I don't know what your rank now, but it's like in a leadership perspective, like, you're not going to be like running your mouth and just like saying dumb shit like at work, because no one's going to respect you. So then there's obviously that ingrained hesitancy to really speak your authentic self on the internet, because any one of your guys or gals, subordinates, like, are going to log on, they're going to see that, we're like, oh, okay, oh, he's acting the fool, okay, so I can act the fool too at work now, and then if he ever calls me out on something, then I can just point to that. So if you didn't have that, I see I'm a small account, you're a small account, I see that, and I'm just like, oh, okay, this guy's probably capable of a lot more, but he's being respectful to the people that look up to him. So I don't know what the answer to that is, honestly. I welcome your comments. I post under my nickname just to protect patients, and I would have done the same thing when I was still active duty, because my name is all over hospital documents, all over cancer reports, and I would never say anything in public that would, let them lose faith in my professional capabilities, because that's what's paying for all of this, right? At the end of the day. So yeah, I'd be curious your thoughts of how you grappled with that professionalism question.
I think it's just knowing the topics to avoid. It's also because you know how easy it is when somebody, like, sometimes I'll go in and I'll just be on a roll replying, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty sarcastic, and I'll try to be funny, right? I don't mean it in a bad way, but I'll make a joke. And obviously, when you're posting on X, it's a huge platform with people from a bunch of different backgrounds that may not understand your sarcasm. So I always just make sure that my initial post can stand up to scrutiny. And then if I get any responses, depending on the response, I might not even engage. I just refuse to. I just don't. Yeah. There was one time where I posted, it was a video game post. It was Call of Duty. And there was this funny clip, and I think I posted, imagine coming back home from a 12-hour shift and playing this, because it was like some kids like moving really fast. Okay. And that's always been the joke, where you hop in the game, and these kids who've been on there for 40 hours like destroy you, right? And now you're stressed out. You were trying to de-stress. And I put that joke in, and this kid, I'm assuming he's a kid, was so angry that I posted that.
Why?
The response was almost something like, "This is why you old people need to stop playing." It was pretty funny. I could tell he was mad. He was genuinely mad. This is why you guys need to just die off and let the young generation play these games, because you can't handle this, blah blah. I thought it was funny because I actually enjoy playing these games, and I didn't have an issue with that. But this kid he had some anger, and this is one of those things those times where I would have been like, what the hell's wrong with you? But I'm like, okay, that kid's angry. I don't know what's going on at home. I didn't respond. Some other dude actually went on there. He's like, "Yo, your generation's cooked," and like they were going at it, and I'm like, "What the fuck?" I didn't respond, and that's just how I do it. I just don't respond. So then I'll be liable for whatever I post on here. So I'm like, I'll post my little joke. Anybody at work that knows me would understand it.
Yeah,
and then that's it.
I totally agree, man. You're responsible for your words, and going under a pseudonym I think that's probably the best. If you're really concerned about potentially saying something that would jeopardize your day job or your source of income, then all of real estate Twitter, you have these people that are like worth hundreds of millions, and they're all just posting under like a pseudonym account, and some of the information is like fairly technical and like very valuable to know. But the trade-off for that is that it's a little bit more difficult to connect with people.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like you see the eyes, you see the face. Even if you don't have a full legal name, it's for purpose of this podcast. I just wanted to use my own face to like network with people and just get interesting guests on here. What I would add to that, OG, is that there's a guy in the internet writing community called Visakhan Veerasamy. He's some Indian dude from Singapore, and I just stumbled across his account, and he's got some funny like little green avatar now, but on his Substack, he said something about, there's a piece where he wrote, and the title is called "Are You Serious?" And in the middle of the piece, he talks about wanting to become a better writer and committing to doing 1,000 word vomits. And he's still working on it. I think he said he's a couple hundred in or something. And I thought about that and realized that's a pretty good idea because it's like a volume business. So I started doing this a few months ago, and then I noticed that my topics were falling into different bins. And so then I just created, so some more raw stuff is behind a paywall, and some of my stuff that's more Boy Scout help, like kosher for everything. That's on my under my name and face. Yeah, these are just ideas. I don't think anyone's got it totally figured out, but I think people are all at different phases of life. And we don't all hate our day jobs. There's like this, you know what I'm saying? There's this theme in Muddy Twitter. It's just like, oh, if you have a day job, you're a loser. Yeah, you got to make all your money. There's so much money to be made out here. It's just like, really, bro? Then like, I don't know if you've gone and behind the scenes of some of these Discord, like some of these paid Discord communities and shit. It's like some of these dudes are like absolute cunts, you know? Like they're just not good people. Like they're just fucking angry, like online writers and shit that are just gouging people, just selling courses to nowhere. It's like, and they don't sleep because they're on the internet all the time. You know what I'm saying? So it's like having a day job is actually a blessing, man, because it gets you. There's something valuable and healthy about going to an office and seeing people, having to look them in the eye, being responsible for real life decisions. That
100%.
It's like that forged your character, right? If you fuck up at work, on an F-15, it's like there's legitimately lives at stake. This is not a game, same thing in my business. So it's like that forges your character. And I think it's like there's this internet culture that we all have to confront because our kids are growing up in it. To an extent, you and I grew up in it too, assuming we're within 10 years of each other. But it's like there's a subculture of people that can really run their mouth and be unsavory human beings and not really deal with the consequences of it, you would if you were just running your mouth to your staff sergeant, like in the middle of the runway. Like you just wouldn't do that because you'd own the consequences of it. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, other than the fact that I am grateful to God every day that I have a way to take care of my family. I have a day job, and I respect people that do and are just doing this on the side.
100%. No, and I want to add on to that, man, because that's one thing I noticed. So when I first hopped into this whole, so it was like I hopped on X, then I stumbled upon Money X.
Yeah.
And I hopped on this Discord channel where I was seeing some people kind of monetize and do all this stuff. So I'm like sitting there just observing. And I'm seeing all these kids, so like 14, 15 years old, and they're hyper obsessed with not having a job. And like you're saying, like demonizing anybody who does have one.
Like
and
it's a low status play or something.
God forbid you have food on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's okay. And it was interesting because then you start seeing immediately after a few months of going super hard on this thing, and they haven't been faced with real adversity, and you start seeing them fall off. Like they just disappear from the face of the earth. You know, exactly. This isn't as easy as whatever guru is making it out to be, right? You don't really understand what it's like to not have money coming in, and then you're having to make this thing on the internet work that's not guaranteed, while you're trying to justify that to yourself when you have no income coming. And as somebody who did that, because when I left active duty, I went into the reserves, but before I started working my cyber job full-time, if you want to call it that, I was in real estate. So I was a real estate agent for a little bit because I was like a traditional reservist.
Okay.
And I went in, I had saved up a bunch of money from active, and I'm like, let me try to make this work. And I experienced that whole thing of trying to build a business and not having a solid check coming in, because now you're basing your money off of commissions. Seeing these kids talk about stuff like that, it's so aggravating. It's like you don't know what that's.
You've never been poor, right? You've never been in that uncertain situation where it's no kidding. You're working on building a safety fund because it's like, where are you going to live? What are you going to eat? You have unexpected car expenses that come up. You have this, your family member gets sick or a funeral. You know what I'm saying? It's just like life happens. Absolutely. That the dream is the same. It's you want to find the work that feels like play and pursue your natural curiosity. Of course, that's the long-term vision. But at the same time, if you don't lead, a challenging life and an interesting life that exposes you to real life consequences, then you really don't have much to write about now, do you?
Exactly.
You're just like some talking head, like playing video games and then disappearing into the internet to write about, I don't know what, like the virtual world? Like you're writing about
exactly.
imaginary conversations that you had with people?
Yep.
Yeah, I think, we're definitely on a similar wavelength there, dude. And that's actually why I have reached out to accounts like yours, because I can tell, I don't know, writing's powerful because you can pick up on vibes. You can just tell like where people are at in life. You can tell the people they're doing well, and this is like a side thing, and they have a lot more to offer, like yourself. Like they have more to offer than you may see on the timeline, right? Because there's clues as to what they're good at, but they also have like this whole other life that you're not going to see on the timeline. So yeah, that's part of the reason I started this podcast, because I just feel like there's just a wealth of life experience that is not necessarily Tim Ferriss. And I love Tim Ferriss. I learned a lot from his videos and his podcasts. So anyways, let's see. I got some more stuff on this list. Okay, so we talked a little about cybersecurity. So let's get it. You mentioned Call of Duty as a de-stress kind of end of the workday type thing. So yeah, when did you start playing video games? What are your favorite ones?
I've been playing video games since I was a kid. My first console was a PlayStation 1 that my dad, I don't know where he got it from, man. I just know he gave it to me. It was in a Heineken box. And it was just like the controllers in there. He's like, yo, some of the guys gave this to me, because he used to own a bar back in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
And I guess one of the guys like, hey man, like I got this for your kid. It's like, okay, great dude. And
is that where you guys are from originally?
Yeah, Puerto Rico.
Cool.
And so that was my first console, was a PlayStation 1 with a Crash Bandicoot 2.
I remember that.
Yeah, dude. So that was it. And then, yeah, I don't play as much anymore, as much as I'd like to, because I'm obviously between work and just building this out.
Right.
I want to take priority in this. But I do use it as like an educational tool. So I think there's a bunch of cool stuff you can a bunch of lessons you can extract from just like playing online sometimes. Even just those like even just Call of Duty, right? Like communication, trying to coordinate a team, or and you could tell when people are playing and when they have to be in charge, how they would act, because you get a lot of their temperament. So if you have a guy that is stressing out over playing a four-player team game of Call of Duty, and they're freaking the fuck out on a video game.
Oh, wow.
I know when we're working, right? You're not going to be able to handle some minor inconvenience. So I've used it as a cool tool to help me communicate with people, like just practice different communication styles, right? Because if you're playing with randoms, you have one person you have no idea how to talk to, right? Because you haven't met them. And then, okay, what words can I use to help direct the team of these three strangers to listen to me? And it's one of those cool things I've liked about video games, and like strategizing and problem solving.
I actually hadn't thought about that one before. I retired from, not retired, but I just put that in the.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I had a nice career as a solo Metal Gear Solid player.
Hell yeah!
But yeah, I had a buddy in med school who would play a lot of games, I guess, to de-stress or check out or procrastinate from studying.
Yes.
And he used to do, I think that was probably in the early, maybe like the first 5 to 10 years of online first-person shooter games. And he used to tell me that it made him it made him funnier, right? Because he was like really good at thinking of insults, like on the fly.
Yep.
Like he just became very witty. I don't know. It was interesting to me. I never trusted myself because I just have such an addictive personality that I remember playing God of War, and I think I played like God of War and then like a couple of the Metal Gear Solid franchises like the summer after my first year in med school. And I actually didn't leave the basement. I was in this basement apartment in Omaha, Nebraska, and I just didn't leave for almost 15 days or something. And I was just like, I think I might have a problem. So I just gave it all to Goodwill. And I still love Metal Gear Solid. And as I've written about this, dude, I learned that, so I can relate to the fact that video games can teach you shit about yourself. Because what it taught me is that the thing that I was drawn to the most was the story. I liked the writing of Hideo Kojima.
Yeah, dude, that is crazy.
Yeah, I just thought and his just quirky sense of humor with the guards and the cardboard boxes and just all kinds of random stuff. And it's like a little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it softcore, but it's definitely some PG-13 stuff in there. Like between I just thought it was just a cool storyline, and how they laced it together too was what drew me to more. And and that's what I ended up focusing on with writing. All right, so let's just wrap up with a couple. Let's see, I got a couple questions still here. All right, so you went Air Force and a reservist. You're running your own life on the side. Tell me a little bit about I'm actually curious about the RV life, dude. If you don't want to talk about it, I'll delete this out of the podcast. But I've always been fascinated by retreating to the desert in an RV. So have you ever done that? And what's it like setting up the RV?
No, but coincidentally, it was a gift when I separated from one of our friends who's a retired officer in the Air Force. And so it's right now we're sitting on a few acres, and it was fairly easy. Just we have to route the water lines and the sewage and all that type of stuff. But it's pretty nice. It made me realize how little I need.
Cool.
But you do have to keep up with the little maintenance items, right? Make sure you empty out the black water tank when you can, and clean up, and just certain maintenance actions that you got to be aware of that you wouldn't otherwise be aware of in a house per se.
Okay.
But they're actually, if you get a nice one, or not a nice one, but they're bigger than you think. They're more comfortable than you think. If it's just you and maybe one other person, they're extremely comfortable, and you realize I don't need all this other BS.
That's awesome. So when it comes to the black water, so if you have access to city utilities and sewage, on the let's say you just buy a lot somewhere in some small town, and they have a hookup. So it's basically just a pipe in the ground that you would connect to.
Yeah.
So when you flush and you shower and everything, does that go into the tank, or does that go directly into the sewage pipe?
No. So it can go straight to the sewage pipe, but what you want to do is rewind. It'll go into the tank first.
Okay.
But you have your, I don't know how to say it in English, I guess a drain. There's like the valve that
Right.
you open up to make sure everything comes out.
Okay.
You don't want to leave the black water one open. Just what you should do, or you don't want to leave either one of them open. Just have them closed. Monitor your levels, because inside the RV, I don't know if you're aware or you know that they'll give you the levels of your tanks.
Yeah, I've read about that.
So you'll just make it a habit to check your levels, and once you're full, you want to open up your black water one first, and then the gray one, which is usually your shower and stuff like that, like your sink.
Okay.
So let the soapy water wash out the rest of the black water.
Gotcha.
Because if you leave the black water one open all the time, then what's going to happen is the waste is going to collect on your tank, right? Because it's not, like the liquid's going to go down, right? But the solid's going to stay there.
Oh, I see.
And it'll get to the point where possibly you're going to flush and you're like, why is the water in the toilet still? And then you have to buy this cool thing called, I forgot the name, but it's like this green liquid. You can buy it at Walmart. You buy the whole bottle and you have to pour it on here, and it does whatever magic it does, and it destroys everything. And then you can clear out your tank. So just make it a habit, keep them closed, and just empty them out periodically.
Gotcha. All right, so that's a bookmark item right there. For any working docs listening, thinking about retreating to the desert in an RV, keep the tanks closed and check your levels. That's the lesson. I really do appreciate that, man, because that's going to be me in maybe a few months. So.
Oh, awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm very curious about rent. I'll rent one a few times before I eventually make the plunge. But yeah, these days I'm just like intrigued with West Texas and like New Mexico and shit. So it's just so quiet out there.
For sure.
Like you just get, even hill country Texas is like very quiet, great skies. Like you just no light pollution.
That's a big one. Yes, that's a big one.
It's just, I've noticed is that the further I've gone along, in my career, it is way better for me to stay in a big city. Otherwise, because people get more complicated diseases, they tend to come to big cities. So it makes me better at my job. But I grew up in a smaller town, so I miss that quiet. It was like in a big city, it's just like there's always someone somewhere crossing paths with someone. It's just, not that I'm antisocial, but come on, dude. It gets to be a lot.
Yeah, sometimes you want to just sometimes you don't want to have that opportunity to run into somebody, not because you don't like the person, but you just want to be on your own.
It's that quiet energy. So yeah, man, this has been a great podcast. I appreciate you, OG. I will paste your link into the description text and any other projects or stuff that you'd like to promote. And if you have anything else, feel free. Otherwise, we'll continue it at a later time.
No, man, I appreciate you inviting me on, man. This is actually my first cast. It's cool. And I appreciate you reaching out and commenting on my stuff and engaging, because as like I told you before, as you're putting stuff out there, it's like, it's easy to think, man, this is pretty bad.
For sure, man.
Like making it yourself. But then when people give you some good feedback, you're like, okay, you know what? This is hopefully helping somebody out. So,
absolutely,
we'll keep going.
And I've met like a handful of ex-Navy, ex-Air Force, Army people on here, and it's just, that has actually become one of the missions of my podcast. Is not just to help the doctor 5 years behind me, but also to help the veteran 5 years behind me, because I think we've all experienced, we may be in different professions, but we've experienced similar issues over the years. So this is designed to be a training wheels platform for veterans trying to get on podcast and getting their ideas out there. So great talk, brother, and we'll see you again.
Appreciate it.
All right, peace. And that is all for this episode of the 3 Deeper Cuts podcast, the lifestyle magazine for the practicing surgical pathologist, bringing you high signal content fueled by 10% buffered neutral formalin. Hope you enjoyed listening. If you like this content, subscribe at 3deepercuts.substack.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Professors, I'm your host, Chuck G. Feel free to drop me some feedback. I want to continue to make this the optimal audio experience for you, the practicing pathologist in the trenches of community medicine. Take care. We'll talk to you next time.